Yeah, help me out on that one.
Okay, so today we're going to start on Yud Gimel Amud Beis. Leima Ketanai, it's 3 lines from the bottom. Yeah, 13b towards the bottom. Okay, we're talking about Tfilas Etzba Mefageles Bechatas Pnimis. Talking about if a person has thoughts while he's dipping his finger into the blood. For the inner chatas means that the chatas offering that the blood was brought into the sanctuary. So we were learning that we had 2 approaches to understand this. The first approach was that how could you say that tfilas etzbas mefagelas if we learn from a shlamim? And by the shlamim, where do we learn pigel from? It says by the carbon shlamim, it says that you can't have thoughts that you're going to eat it after that you're going to eat it or the mizbeach is going to consume it after the allotted time. Now, by the shlamim, there's no halacha that you need to dip your finger into the blood to apply it onto the altar. So how could you learn from that by the chatas where that it's going to be mefagel? So we said one approach was that it's a rebate from the pasuk. Doesn't need to be everything that's by the shlamim is going to be the same. We learned it from the pasuk that whatever would affect the shlamim, the same thing that would affect another carbon. Okay. Then we had a second approach to this, and we said that no, we actually are learning from shlamim, and we learned from shlamim that just like the shlamim would invalidate, so too the chatas would invalidate the chatas, but it's a limit from shlamim. And for example, we said that the shlamim would invalidate shleibim kaimai, chuslam kaimai, if you have thoughts out of the allotted place. And so to the chatas, whatever would invalidate the chatas. So we said maybe that's not a good comparison because chuslam kaimai applies to everything. So that's why it works, but maybe something that doesn't apply to everything, it's not going to work. Anyway, where we ended up was that we had a source from Noisin Bekeli. That was our source by a carbon mincha. Putting it into the vessel that doesn't have a corresponding law to the carbon because kaimetz.
More than just that.
And so therefore it comes out that you see that there's more than just just what applies to the shlamim. And the Gemara says at the end that no, Noisim Bekeli is similar to Kabbalah, receiving the blood, which means we're left with only things that apply to the shlamim would have. So we don't really have this for Tfilas Etzba. That's what we're holding. That was a page of Gemara in summary. So the Gemara says, Leima Ketanai. Let us say that there really is a source, but it's Machlekes Tanaim. The Tani Chada Tfilas Etzba Mefagelas Bechatas. Tani Dechleim Mefagelas V'leim Mispagelas. Okay. One brisa says that dipping the finger into the blood, Mefagelas Bechatas, would invalidate the chatas if a person has thoughts to sprinkle the blood, sprinkle the blood, or to offer the limbs, or to eat from the sacrifice out of the allotted time. And the other brisa says, like mefagelas. Mefagelas means that if you have thoughts to offer the limbs while you're dipping the finger into the blood, you have thoughts to offer the limbs out of the allotted time. Or v'lei mispagelas also doesn't become pigel because of that, which would mean that if you shechted it with thoughts to dip your finger into the blood, mispagelas, it reflects a bit. Yeah. So then
when it brings the prices, names or just
no, we don't have names. We have anonymous prices, So the my love, you know what the pshat must be? Tanaihi. must be a machlokes tanoim. And now what we're thinking now when we say tanoihi, we're thinking that do we consider the tefillas etzba, and do we consider it like halacha or not? Do we consider it like a chelik of the avodas? One opinion says that it's like the avodah, one says that it's not like the avodah. So the Gemara says, "Loi, you don't have to say that. Really, everyone says that it's halacha, that it is considered halacha, dipping the finger, halacha, not halacha. Halacha means walking to the altar. But Rabbanan Rab Shimon, but there's a machlekes Rabbanan Rab Shimon, which we already have, where Rab Shimon says that halacha does not affect the validity of the sacrifice. Since you can do the sacrifice without halacha, you can slaughter it right next to the altar. So guess what? Over here, what we're going to say is that the opinion that says that it's not mifagelas, second brisa, that's the opinion of Rab Shimon, because they don't hold of. Really, it's comparable to halacha, but this halacha isn't a problem. Gemara says, Rab Shimon, ma'yer tefillas etzba. Why do we have to have a brisa that's telling you about dipping the finger? This whole thing was only talking about a chatas pnimis. But Reb Shimon has another opinion that says that anything that's not offered on the outer altar, so it doesn't become pigel. So you can't be Reb Shimon. If it's Reb Shimon, then the whole law doesn't apply to this case. Elahava Rabbanan. Rather, we're talking about the Rabbanan. Okay. So if it's the Rabbanan, then how do we have a machlokes here if it's like comparable to halacha? It says, now the truth is that the application of the blood on the altar by an inner sacrifice says clearly that he has to dip his finger in. By the outer sacrifice, by the one that's brought on the outer altar, it doesn't say that he has to dip his finger in the blood, but we know that he has to apply the blood with his finger. So it doesn't say it clearly. So what the Gemara is doing now, it's saying by the chatas chitzainus, where it doesn't say clearly that he has to dip his finger in, so then we'll say that it's not mefagel, because it doesn't say clearly in the Torah that that's an avodah. But by the chatas pnimis, where it says clearly that he should dip his finger into the blood, so we'll say that would be that would affect the validity if he has the wrong thoughts while he's dipping his finger in. So the Gemara says chatas chitzainus pshita, like siba v'tavel. Of course, it's going to be okay by the chatas chitzainus if he dips his if he has the wrong thoughts while he's dipping his finger in. It doesn't say clearly in the Torah that that's how he has to do it. So why would we even think that it would invalidate that? We need a brisa that tells me that it doesn't. It says it's necessary. So could enter your mind to say it says that he should take the blood. It doesn't say he should dip his finger in, but it says he should take the blood. If
It says light. Did you skip that word? Did you? Light.
Tell me, where does it say that? Light. I'm sorry. Pshita like sibu v'tavel. Itzshach salknech. Hayaluk siv v'lakach. Yasikaif rami lahu ayade. The mishkos menachriti. Hayaluk siv v'tavel dami. Did I skip some? Okay.
Yeah.
So if a kaif is an ape, what is that? A monkey?
Yes.
If a monkey would come, what do they translate over there? A monkey? A monkey would come and put it on his hand. He didn't dip it in. This is a robot. If a robot would come and put it on his hand and he didn't actually dip his finger in, so it would have to do it again. So Kamash Malan comes to teach us lachi like sivitavel. It turns out that the reason why it doesn't say vitavel is simply this, to tell me that by the chatas chitzainus, if he has thoughts of chutz lizmanai, pigel thoughts, it doesn't affect the validity of the sacrifice, but he still has to dip his finger. So it doesn't. We know he has to dip his finger in to get it, but the thoughts by that service don't matter. Don't matter. Okay, that's what we're holding. Next piece of the Mishnah said that when it comes to walking the blood to the altar, it doesn't matter the thoughts during that time because that's not a necessary service. Why? Because you can slaughter the sacrifice right next to the altar, and then you don't have to walk. Only a service that you can't do without. That's what Reb Shimon's opinion was. Amar Reb Shimon ben Lakish. It's not Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon ben Lakish is a friend of Reb Yochanan. Reb Shimon is Reb Shimon ben Yochai. It's 200 years later.
This,
It is Rish Lakish. Rish Lakish.
They're able to argue against each
Rish Lakish and Reb Yochanan, sure. They love to. That's
other. Did they ever
what
see
they
each
do.
other?
Yeah, they were chavrusas.
Oh,
Reb Yochanan and Rish Lakish. They were
okay,
brothers.
Rabbi Yochanan, the one who brought it back.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought this should. Oh,
It's Reb Shimon. Rish Lakish's full name is Reb Shimon ben Lakish.
something.
So he says, "Meider Reb Shimon b'hilachas katas pnimis shemachshava piselaspo." Rish Lakish says that why do we normally say that Reb Shimon holds that the walking of the blood to the altar is not does not what's the word for makiv?
hold back. Okay, hold back. Delay.
Doesn't invalidate. What do we say that it's not essential? Why do we say that it's not essential? Because because you can do without it. But how do you get the blood inside the sanctuary to offer that by the chatas pnimis, by those sacrifices where the blood needs to go inside? You're not going to slaughter the sacrifice in the sanctuary. That wouldn't be typical. So therefore, Rashi says. Lav eirach ara, nishchet behechal. Lav eirach ara means it's not like derech eretz. Now, it's a little surprising because the derech eretz part is going to affect the validity. I mean, I would think that only a real law would affect derech eretz. Eirach means derech ara eretz. Maybe.
Common way. That's what
Maybe.
people do. It's not that.
Maybe.
Their hair has much more application. Their hair.
It's not common.
It's different. I don't know.
Maybe. Because it's in a different language.
Yeah.
So you hear it differently.
Yeah, that.
But it's actually, I think the translation would be derech eretz is eirach ara. They did studies on this, how people respond to phrases in different languages, even though it's exactly the same question, and people respond differently. Like, my example of this is, would you like some chalent? They say, no, I don't want chalent. I say, "Spillst a bissel chalent?" They say, "We need it." I think it's like more okay. Anyway, okay. So since you're not going to slaughter the sacrifice, whatever the case is, you're not going to slaughter the sacrifice inside the heichal. So therefore, that's going to mean that you're going to have to walk it. You're going to have to walk the blood. You're going to have to walk the blood. Then Reb Shimon is maida that the thoughts during that service is going to be effective because you can't do without it. Because you can't do without that service. Okay, the Gemara asks, Vamar Reb Shimon, 1 second, how can you say that? Reb Shimon says, we had right on the top of the page that anything that's not on the outer altar doesn't have pigul. It has to be similar to a shlamim. Reb Shimon was very particular about that. Reb Shimon, he agrees that it should be puzzle. Now, what we're saying over here is that we've just moved from the laws of pigul to the laws of puzzle. Shimon, even though pigul is very particular, but when it comes to making the sacrifice puzzle, it would still be puzzle. It won't be karis, but it would still be puzzle. Now he has a kal v'chaimer to prove this. He says, when it comes to shaloi lishman, that means you change which sacrifice it's meant to be. You have thoughts that it, instead of being the sacrifice that it was designated for, you have thoughts that it should
So
be
it's not
some
Lishma
other.
anymore, so it's not
Shlei
Lishma.
Lishma, exactly, the rules for Shlei. Whereas for Shlei Lishma, which is kosher for Shlamim, because the Shlamim is not one of the two sacrifices that become invalid if you have the wrong thoughts, right? It's possible, I'm sorry, Mashlei Lishma Hukshu B'Shlamim, which is kosher for Shlamim, possible b'chatas, but that would invalidate a chatas, which means a chatas is stricter. Chutz Lizmanai, when it comes to out of the allotted time, Shapaisel B'Shlamim, that invalidates the Shlamim, right? Pigel. Ain't a din shifsel b'chatas should for sure invalidate the chatas. Talking about the chatas where the blood is offered inside. So we have a kal v'chaimer that proves to us that it has got to be invalid. It has to be invalid. We didn't say that it's pigel, but it's invalid. Vashkan chutz l'zmani. So it's very nice. So you figured out that chutz l'zmani is going to be possible by a chatas pnimis. Okay, by the halacha, by the chatas pnimis. Problem is chustam kaimah minol. How do we know that the same law would apply to chustam kaimah? So he says imi chutz l'zmani. Maybe we'll say, well, look, let's just do a precedent. If chutz l'zmani is possible, so chustam kaimah should also. He said, 1 second, mal chutz l'zmani shekin kares. Chutz l'zmani normally has a halacha of kares, which is pigel. That's much stricter. Chustam kaimah doesn't. So therefore, I could have thought that maybe just because I have a kal v'chaimer that it's going to apply to the chatas for chutz l'zmani, that doesn't mean that kal v'chaimer would apply. That doesn't mean that doesn't mean that I can automatically learn from that as a precedent that it applies to other laws that don't have that same stringency. It says maybe maybe you can learn from Shlei Lishma, which means let's just redo the kal v'chaimer, and it's exactly the same kal v'chaimer. You don't need a mamatzina, you don't need a precedent. You can do it again from scratch. The kal v'chaimer goes like this: if Shlei Lishma is kosher for a shlamim, but chuslam kaimai, Shlei Lishma is kosher for a shlamim, but possible for a chatas, Shlei kaimai, which is possible for a shlamim, for sure should be possible for the chatas.
What is Miss said?
Kal v'chaimer,
No,
Shlei Lishma,
no.
Shlei kaimai,
Yes.
out of its allotted place.
Out of its allotted place.
Yeah, and there's a certain area where the carbon needs to be brought, where it needs to be offered.
If
And
it's
he has
offered
thoughts.
out of it.
He has not that it's offered out of it. He has thoughts to offer it out of it. Those
So
thoughts
about the
themselves would
Beagle's
invalidate.
Thoughts validate.
Thoughts themselves could invalidate a sacrifice. Okay, so the Gemara says, you can't make a kal v'chaimer like that because shekain nayeg bebama. When we're talking about the first, when you have a kal v'chaimer, so you have the first part and then you have the second part. First part is if the weak person can lift 10 pounds. The second part is the second person for sure. So the problem over here is that the weak part has a certain stringency over the strong part. What's that stringency? That over here we're thinking Shlei Lishma. If Shlei Lishma is kosher by Shlamim, but it's possible by a chatas, that's the weak part. So if we're saying now that Shlei Lishma applies when they were allowed to bring sacrifices outside of the temple during those like 14 years here and there, like before the temple was built, or in between the Mishkan Shilei and the 50-something years over there. So so you were allowed to bring sacrifice on a bama, on a private altar. Now the rules of that altar are that there's no such thing as chutzlam kaimai, out of its allotted place, because there's no allotted place. But you still have the rules of Shlei Lishma, that the sacrifice needs to be brought with the intention of that sacrifice. So when you're telling me the weaker one, we say 1 second, but that applies to Obama. But and so you're trying to make a kal v'chaimer, but the weaker one really has a strength because it applies to, you can't learn from that to the strong one. So Shlei Lishma, we say Chiv Shlei Lishma b'maynai, and maybe you drop the word Chiv. What's the zayin here? Yeah, you dropped the word Chiv. Shlei Lishma b'maynai. What are we talking about over here? That it's a sacrifice at Shlei Lishma. It says b'Pesach v'chatas. We're dealing with a carbon Pesach and a carbon chatas. That was our whole story. What would be invalid? It says, well, guess what? Pesach v'chatas b'bama like karvu. You can't bring a carbon Pesach and a carbon chatas on a bama. the bama was you're only allowed to do nedarim and nedavas, donation offerings. You can't bring obligation offerings on the bama. You can't bring a carbon pesach. You can't bring a carbon chatas. So you can't use the stringency of bama to upset the kal v'chaimer. So therefore, we'll have a kal v'chaimer that chuslam kaimer would also invalidate by a chatas pnimis by halacha, right? That's where we're all learning everything here. It's for halacha by the chatas pnimis. Okay. Amar Iba Yasema, or if you want, we could say Hekeshu, that it's actually a comparison because of the words in the pasuk. Pasuk says, "Im hayachal yeyachal bayim ashlishi pigalhu." So Hekeshu shlishi, when it says the word shlishi, is echos losmane. We're talking about out of the allotted time because it's had intention to eat it on the third day, which no sacrifice goes for 3 days. Only sacrifices go for 2 days. Pigel, when it says pigel, zechusam kaim is coming to add in that there's also a concept of chutzim kaim, which this Gemara, which we'll come across more often, but it's very surprising because pigel is actually the word that's used for chutzlas manai, and chutzim kaim isn't actually pigel, but nevertheless the Gemara learns from the extra word pigel to teach me chutzim kaim. It's funny because it's like not the right word for it, but whatever the case is. So since we have this comparison, we have a rule: ein mishivan ala hekesh. You can't ask any question. Which before we wanted to ask a question 1 second. Chutz lizmana is kares. Chutzim kaimai is not kares. Well, ein mishivan ala hekesh. You can't ask any questions. All right. Okay. Amar Rava. Rava says, yeah, there's some diagrams Hill showing me on the. Imtim Talaymer of Shimon Savala Kibrei. If you want to say that Reb Shimon holds like his son, or Reb Shimon's son is Reb Elazar Bar Shimon, yeah? Now Reb Elazar Bar Shimon has an opinion, Damar, that he says, Beinu ulam b'lam mizbeach tzafain, ein machshava meyalas b'hilacha chatas pnim sel pesach ulam. There's a question over here. When you have to offer a sacrifice on the a sacrifice that's kodesh kadashim, it has to be slaughtered on the north of the courtyard, the azara, north side of the courtyard. So let's say over here. Let's say this is the mizbeach, all right? Put it on a slant so you see the ramp. Yeah, right. This is the ramp of the mizbeach, and that's up here is the mizbeach. Yeah. So the sanctuary is right over here, right to the west of the ramp. This is Myrav. You think Kodesh Kadashim, and so it's not going to go into the Kodesh Kadashim. That's 2 rooms removed. Well, actually 3 rooms removed. The blood is going to go into the ulam, which is the hallway, like the T, the top of the T, and then then it goes into the next room, which is the heichal. So. The north side, this is the west side, this is the east side. The north side is over here. This is the north. This is the south. The south is over here. So I have to do all the slaughtering on this side. So we were saying before that, well, if you slaughter it over here, then you got to get it into the to the room. You got to walk. This is 1 second. But according to Rebbe Elazar Bar Shimon, he holds Beinu ulam v'lam mizbeach tzafin. Actually, the area in here, it doesn't mean tzafin. Tzafin could mean the north of the altar, just like this one line that goes outward like that. But actually, north means anything on this side. It doesn't have to be only within the frame of between the east and west frame of the mizbeach. Beinu ulam v'lam mizbeach, between the ulam, which is the hallway in front of the sanctuary, and the altar, is also considered the north. So you can get very, very close. And so if that's the case, the only actual area where you really need to walk would be between the ulam and the sanctuary, because I can slaughter it all the way up to the doorway by the ulam. And why were we saying that Reb Shimon would agree by chatas pnimis usually Reb Shimon holds that walking is not considered a service because you can do it right at the altar. But we said that he would agree if it's the inner, if you have to bring it inside, then you're not going to slaughter it inside. So then walking would be considered a service. So well, not if he holds like Rabbi Elazar Bar Shimon, not if Reb Shimon holds like his son, because then he would hold that you can slaughter it right next to the doorway. The only place where you would have to walk it would be Mipesach Ulam Lefnim, from the entrance of the hallway inside. Bim Tim Tzalim Mesavakav Rabbi Yehuda. But if you want to say that he holds like Rabbi Yehuda, then Meteicha Zara Mekadesh, that you can actually offer something in the Azara itself. What does that mean? So Rabbi Yehuda. We're switching now to offering the yeah, we're switching now not to bringing the blood inside. We're switching now to offering the spoonfuls of levina, the frankincense that was carried out and offered, and that allows the showbreads to be eaten. Right? They would offer that. So if you're allowed to offer that, if you have to take it all the way to the altar, then you would have to walk it because you got to get it out of the sanctuary to the altar. But if you can, if the entire floor of the courtyard is eligible to offer a sacrifice, like we find when Shlomo Melech made the inauguration, there were so many sacrifices they couldn't fit it on the altar. So they would just offer it all over the place on the floor. Everyone was just sort of like Miron on Lag Baimer. It's like little fires all over the mountain. Like everyone's barbecuing. So the floor itself could it could be offered. So if that's the case, so then the only way you would be able to have thoughts that would invalidate this frankincense would be while you're leaving the sanctuary to get to the outside. But once you're outside, you can already offer it on the floor. And if you're going to hold that the holiness of the Heichal and the holiness of the Ulam, the hallway, are the same holiness, then I would only have just the walking of the doorway itself, because once you get outside, you can already offer it there. So there's only like one step. And if you hold that within the doorway you're considered inside, then and you don't even have one step where there's going to be a difference where you're going to have to where there's a obligatory walking. All you have to do is stretch your hand out and it's already there. And if you hold that halacha shlei beregel is not considered halacha shlei beregel means that walking without your feet. That the Gemara is going to discuss on the next page, but that basically means moving the item without moving your feet, just like moving your hand. Is that considered halacha? Yeah, but so is that considered halacha? So here we're saying that if you're inside the ulam, which is the hallway, the entranceway, and you're in the doorway, you have to get it out of the doorway. So the way you get it out is you stretch your hand out and you put it outside. Now, once it's outside, it's already eligible to be offered right there on the floor. So then I would say, well, while you're stretching it out, maybe that should be considered halacha because that's a necessary activity. Anything that's necessary, according to Reb Shimon, thoughts that would invalidate the sacrifice would apply when it's a necessary activity. But now we're saying that stretching out the hand is not considered an activity at all. Halacha needs to be by feet. That we'll see. It could be passed also. Would that make a difference?
In the case of that they can't walk, they could cover a lot more ground.
No, but they don't even need to cover ground. because they can burn it right outside the doorway, right on the floor. So anything that's possible, that's not obligatory, would not invalidate. So once from the inside to the outside, you can already burn it right there on the floor. Then even if they want to walk it further, but all of that is not necessary. So, okay. That was just an interesting piece of if you hold like this, if you hold like that, if you hold like this, hold like that, you're going to be left with nothing. You have to add up all the opinions together. Yeah. Sort of like if you take all the chumras on Pesach, you won't be able to eat anything. So you don't eat potatoes, and you don't eat fish, and you don't eat chicken, because different communities have different things. You're going to be left with nothing. All right. Amalei Abaya la'amayre de Rav Chisda. Amayre is usually like the translator or the announcer or something. So Abaya says to the Amayre of Rav Chisda. Now, on the side of my Gemara, it corrects it to Rav Sheshis instead of Abaya. It's on Abaya, it's Rav Sheshis. Okay, maybe because he was Abaya could have been talking to him. It doesn't have to be. Abaya was like a student of Rav Chisda as well. So it's not because of the time. Rav Sheshis is older.
They haven't thought that this was used to announce the teacher's room.
Right. So that Meir was had a louder voice, and he would say over the teachings. And okay. So Rabbi tells him, "Boy, me name Rav Chisda, please go ahead and ask Rav Chisda, halacha bizar mahu," which he's asking according to Reb Shimon. According to Reb Shimon, that holds that that you don't need to do halacha. You don't need to do halacha, and therefore, if there's thoughts by the halacha, doesn't invalidate. So he says, go ask Rav Chisda what would happen if a non-Kohen would do the halacha. Now you have to realize that the service already started. The shechita we know could be by Yisrael. The receiving of the blood had to be done by a Kohen. That we know, it says in the pasuk. The sprinkling it on the altar has to be. So what about can a non-Kohen step in and take it from the Kohen, bring it to the other Kohen, and the other Kohen will sprinkle it? Because you said that halacha is not significant. Amalei kshera. He says it's kosher, mikra messiani. And a pasuk is a support. It says vayishchutu as a pesach v'yizruk kayanim es adam miyadam alaviyim mafshitim. It says they slaughtered the from Pesach, and the kayanim sprinkled the blood from their hands. Now, whose their hands? From the ones that slaughtered it. Now, obviously, they didn't want to catch the blood because you needed a kohen to catch the blood. But there must have been that the non-kohen that did the shechita was able to take the blood, offer it, and give it to the kohen that's going to sprinkle it, and then he would sprinkle it from their hands. Must have Rav Sheshis. Maybe that's why we switched it to Rav Sheshis, because Rav Sheshis, if Rav Sheshis was the one that asked Rav Chisda the question, now he's the one that's following up. He says, 1 second. You have a brisa. It says, "Bizar v'ainen." If it's a brisa or a mishnah. A non-kohen, an einen means someone that's in mourning, shikar, someone that's drunk, balmum, or if he has a blemish, he's not allowed to be doing the service in the temple. Kabbalah, b'halacha, b'zrika pasul, whether it's the receiving of the blood, whether it's the walking of the blood, whether it's the sprinkling of the blood, it's pasul. Maybe it's not Rav Shimon. Anyway, I don't really know what Rav Shimon. B'chein yoshev. And the same thing applies if he's sitting. It's also invalid. B'chein small, and also if he's using his left hand.
He's doing that by them.
Yeah. Where it says tiyufta, that's a very strong question. But Rav Chisda Krakama, Rav Chisda quoted a pasuk. Why? I thought the question was only according to Rav Shimon. Maybe the Bryce isn't Rav Shimon. Anyway, I guess. Okay, first of all, Rav Chisda quoted a pasuk. Where it says the Ovid Maisa Itztaba. That pasuk doesn't mean that the non-Kohen actually walked, the Zor actually walked the blood from the place where it was slaughtered to. Could be that the Kohen that walked it handed it to the Yisrael to hold it. Itztava, it just means like a platform.
Right.
He gave it to him to hold. He was holding it, still the other person came and took it. He could have put it down on a, on the table. He gave it to him to hold, but not that he was walking it. So the pasuk doesn't tell me the halacha of walking. Rabba v'Rav Chisda Dami Tarvayu Halacha Bizar Machlekes Reb Shimon v'Rabbanan. Rabban Reb Yosef, to Rosh Yeshiva in the Pumbedisa. They say that the walking of the non-Kohen, that's actually Machlekes Reb Shimon v'Rabbanan. Reb Shimon Dama, Reb Shimon holds Aved Shef Shelavat Lav Aved Sher Bizar. Shimon holds that if the Aved isn't necessary, so then it's Ksher Bizar. But Reb Shimon said it's not necessary, and therefore thoughts about it won't affect the validity. In the Rabbanan Psula, Rabbanan say it's possible. Amalei Abaya says to his teachers, both of them are his teachers, Rabban and Rabbi Yosef. But Shchita Davai the Shef Shalvatik Ksher Bizar. 1 second. You're doing this comparison from Reb Shimon's opinion, and you're telling me about if it's going to be kosher bizarre. But 1 second. Everyone holds that Shchita is considered an Avaida. Thoughts by the Shchita would invalidate a sacrifice. The wrong thoughts. And nevertheless, Shchita is Ksher Bizarre. So it's not matching up. The rules, the way, the structure, the way that you're setting it up. You're setting it up that anything that thoughts regarding it would be permissible, but wouldn't invalidate because it's not a necessary service, would also be allowed to be done by a zar, but that's not true. Because the shchita, which is allowed by a zar, the thoughts would invalidate it. So it's not a perfect match. Well, Amarle or Amrule maybe shchita lav avayda. They said, nah, shchita is not actually avayda. Why? It's not avayda. Reb Zeira Amarav. Reb Zeira says the name of Rav shchita is para bizar psula. That if the para aduma is slaughtered by a zar, by a non-Kohen, it would be invalid. V'amarav Rav says about it, Elazar v'chukah tzibah. Special, specific laws that are said by the paraduma. It says chukah in Parshas Chukas, and it says Elazar, that's supposed to be done by Elazar, which is the deputy Kohen Gadol, right? He's the one that's supposed to do this. So we see that the laws are very strict. That we need to have if it wouldn't be a service, then how could you even have a law that it needs to be the Kohen? The Gemara says Shani Para the Kachi Bedek Abayasi. You're asking from the para aduma. That's not even a sacrifice that's brought on the altar. That's only considered bedek habayis. That's considered belongs to the temple fund. It's not considered kedusha saguf. I'm not sure if that's 100%, but whatever it is, it's not considered kachei mizbeach. Okay. So the Gemara says v'lav kol d'cheinu. So then you're making things worse. He says you're not making it better. He says kachei bedek habayis havi avayda kachei mizbeach lav avaydi. When it comes to the temple fund, where you don't usually have things that are avaida, now you turned it into an avaida, the shchita, that it needs to be done by a kohen. If it belongs on the mizbeach, on the altar, for sure it should be done by a kohen. Even things that aren't on the mizbeach have to be done by a kohen. For sure, it needs to be avaida. It doesn't have to be done by a kohen, but for sure it's considered an avaida. Amar Rav Shisha Breder Avidi. Shisha Breder Avidi says, 1 second. You're throwing things around like this, but it's not necessarily so. Who looks at a spot of tzuras? A kohen. You need to have a kohen, but nevertheless, lalav avaydahi. But it's not considered avayda by kuna. You need to have a kohen. So you see that there are things that need to be with a kohen, and it doesn't mean that it's an avayda. You say, 1 second. What about the walking of the limbs? Usually when we're talking about halacha, we're talking about walking the blood to the altar to sprinkle. What about getting the limbs onto the altar? That's considered an avodah shef shel levatla. It's not really necessary. You could throw it also. Psula bizarre, but it has to be done by a kohen, not a zar. So we're saying that it can't be done by a zar. Why do you tell me it's a zar? The Gemara says, well, hechad the gali gali, hechad lay gali lay gali. Like the Stein, like the gali gali. It says where the pasuk says it clearly, then we have it clearly. If it doesn't say it, so then we can say that it doesn't need to be done by a Kayan. Lav kol dechenu, but don't you think it should be a kolshkein? It says, when it comes to getting the limbs to the altar, it's not essential, it's not makev, right? Even if you don't burn the limbs, the sacrifice was still acceptable because the blood was sprinkled. And nevertheless, when you do it, you have to use a kayan. When it comes to the getting the blood to the altar, which that affects the validity, shouldn't that be a kal v'chomer? Okay. So Itmar, although we have this like strong question, Itmar, we have a statement, Amar Ula, Amar Rabbi Elazar. You with me?
Stuck on Zoom, so I couldn't say. Zoom coming down.
I said it for you.
Oh, you said it.
Yeah.
I just heard.
But he's saying because he's on Zoom, so that's why he's on Zoom. Okay. So where's your hot chocolate? So you're gonna bring hot chocolate. Does the machine still do it? Does it?
I don't know.
I'm having
I
that.
think so.
I have it every morning. I like it better.
Uh-huh.
Also reminds me of when I was
It's too sweet.
It's just-
very sweet.
Yeah.
But it still is great.
Okay. Okay, where if Manami Amar Ula Amar Rabbi Elazar. Ula says name of Rabbi Elazar. Ula was the traveler. He would bring halachas usually from Rabbi Yochanan. But Rabbi Elazar was a student friend of Rabbi Yochanan, so he brings also from Elazar. It says halacha bezar psula, Pila Rav Shimon. Different than the way Rav Chisda put it before, right? Before we said that it would be kosher. Ula says that it's not kosher in the name of Rabbi Elazar. That if a non-Kohen walks the blood to the altar, that would invalidate the sacrifice. Iboilo, where's the question? This was a discussion that we had before. We mentioned this, that if you move the blood, but not through not through walking, just because you pass it, would that be considered halacha? Well, Tashema, come in here. It says v'chein yoshev, v'chein small as possible. He does the aveda sitting. And what was the aveda that we're talking about? Receiving the blood, walking, or the zrika. Those are the things that you mentioned. V'chein small, or if he does this left puzzle. But if he's standing similar to sitting, what does that mean? Not that he's. That means that he's just stretching out his hand. We're saying, so what would that be? That would be kosher. Sitting is the problem, but standing would be okay, even if he's, even if he's not moving.
Standing and then did not walk.
Standing and didn't walk, right? Standing as to what is the when it says by Tfilas Haderech, it says you say Tfilas Haderech ba'amida. So now this is the whole discussion. Does ba'amida mean because you're traveling when you're oimed, then it means you stop? But amida in reference to sitting means standing. When in reference to walking, oimed means to stop.
Right.
Doesn't mean to stand. It means to
Right.
stop. In reference to sitting, oimed means to stand up. It's unclear by
So
Tfilas
what do we
Haderech
do?
if it means amida
So
means
how do
to
they
stop
possibly-
walking or it means to
Yeah,
And
when
so-
you're driving or if you're flying, you're not standing
right.
So what's the so?
and you're not stopping.
So you definitely have to stop. Where do you
Hey,
stop?
pilot,
No, but
Pause.
we're allowed to stop on
Wait, what if it's trying to.
No, not the
take
airplane.
off
Ignore the
and
airplane.
then
Ignore the
you
airplane
realize
because
you
there's a whole
can
thing
see
about
And
the
cars.
car. So you're supposed to actually stop to say Tfilas Haderech.
in the middle of the highway.
Yeah, you pull
But you
over.
gotta
To pull
stop.
over.
That's not safe.
Just pull off an exit.
There's
You
a
definitely have to stop. You know, it says Bamida.
there's
It says
a
get out of the car and stand up. That's the shame.
You know,
there's a bracha you make when you pass by. If you pass by a place where there was a miracle, you say Baruch Shas Linas b'Makom Hazeh.
Right.
Some they call that Tfilas Haderech sometimes. Over there, you're supposed to stop, but then they say Yisroi made the bracha later, so you don't have to stop.
What was Yisro's miracle?
Because when he came, he passed by where Kriyas Yamsuf was,
Oh,
and he made the bracha later when he got to the camp. That's when he did the bracha. So it's
I'm not familiar with that.
retroactive.
This is interesting stuff.
But the lashon was tefillas haderech.
Anyway, I'm just talking about. It says over here, I made that he's standing. It means he's standing. Dumya diyashiv, similar to sitting, which means that he's not moving. So kasha, that would be acceptable. The Gemara says, well, dumya yoshev the kashayif meishav aimed dumya diyashiv denayed porta. Maybe yoshev means, how does he do the avodah if he's sitting? That would mean that he drags himself on the ground towards the mizbeach. What would it mean? I made it would be kosher. Dumya diyashiv. The nayed porta, that must mean nayed porta must mean that he just leans. Oh, that could also mean the nayed porta would mean that he moves his feet a little bit. Moves his feet. So we don't have actually an answer to the no movement of the feet, if that's going to be considered a service.
Moving a little bit means like less than Dalaramas, and then again less
It
than
means
Dalaramas.
moving the feet like.
No, but I'm saying if you walk less than Dalaramas and then again less than that, again, so he never really was carrying,
It's a pivot.
I'm sorry. Oh, to pivot. That's what you mean. Right. Tashima. So come in here. The Shachat Yisrael v'Kibul HaKayin Neistan l'Chaver v'Chaver l'Chaver. A non-Jew. This is talking about the Korban Pesach, maybe. The by the Korban Pesach, a non-Kohen would shech, the Yisrael would shech, and then the Kohen would receive the blood, and then he would pass it from one Kohen to another Kohen. He would pass it all the way up to the altar. So you see that you can do the avodah without actually walking. You just pass it. And over there, maybe they moved a little bit to get it to the other fellow. Doesn't mean that they didn't walk at all. My kamashmon. Then what's the chiddush if they're actually walking? Thought the chiddush would be maybe that you don't have to do any walking.
Only if you use two people. You can spread your hand, I'll give it to
Right.
him. Walk 5 feet.
But it says the chiddush is brave Amhadras Melech is coming to tell me that we like to do it with a lot of people. The more people we have, the more honor it is for the king.
It's the origin of the song Hakasad Ovrot.
What's the song?
Hakasad Ovrot. Hakasad Ovrot. It's called Israelis.
Oh, interesting. Tashima, come and listen. Let me leave that Gemara out. I'll use it. Let's see. Oh, well. Okay. Make sure you go to the right airport. We have two.
And that.
Where are you going? No, that's not a trip. That's an obligation.
What do you say?
I thought you were going off on the trip.
No, it's not. No. Everyone's coming home. Okay. What were we holding? We were on Yudalin Amid Beis.
So you don't want to drive?
Hmm?
You don't want to drive?
Tashima. Kibala kasha v'nasan l'pasal yachsel l'kasha. If someone that's eligible to do the Abayda receives the blood, and he gives it to someone that's not eligible, so yachsel l'kasha, he could just return it. So, 1 second, but maybe he walked with it, that would be no good.
Well, they're bringing a proof from this that that's not really walking. Because it can come right back to him.
Oh.
It shows giving it over.
Right. So if he didn't walk, if he just handed it, so then that would prove that there was no walking that took place, even though so handing it is not considered walking. This is called halacha shlei beregel. The Gemara says, "Ema yachzer akasher v'yakabla." How do you know it means that he hands it back? Maybe it means yachzer l'kasher means that he has to go back and get more blood. You have to do it again. Not if the blood is still coming out, then you can just put the cup again and get more.
Is this not considered one of the services?
That's what we were saying, because it's not one of the services, because he didn't actually walk. He just handed it. Handing it, that was our discussion, is handing it considered a service? We're saying that it's not. He said, but not necessarily so. Maybe it really is a service. What it says, Yasel Kasha, means that the Kasha goes back and gets a new thing of blood. Itmar. We have a statement that was said by Amiram, Amar Ula, Amar Rabbi Yechon. Here we have actually Rabbi Yechon. Halacha shlei beregel leishmei halacha. That halacha, that walking without the feet, which means that you're just passing it, is not considered halacha. So therefore, if you have thoughts while you're passing it, that's not considered for thoughts that would invalidate the sacrifice. Gemara now says, Efshel l'sakna, Efshel l'sakna. Since it's not considered a service, so can you bring it back and do it again? Now, 1 second. How did it get invalid anyway if it's not considered a service?
Maybe it was once upon a time good, and then it just turned bad.
Maybe because you passed it to a, maybe we're talking about you passed it to a non-Kohen. Passed it to a non-Kohen, then can you just give it back because you didn't do a service? So Tashima, come and listen. It's dripping. A blemish Kayan. Okay, yeah, a Kayan that's not eligible. So Tashima, so come in here. Ibala Kasher v'nosan l'pasal. The case that we just quoted. If a eligible Kohen receives the blood and he gives it to someone that's not eligible, why is it not eligible? Maybe he has a blemish. So Yachser l'kasher, he returns it. Now, we said before that could have a different meaning. I have to move over because it's tricky. So that could have a different meaning. Actually, you know, let me just put this. So we said before that doesn't mean actually that he could just return it. We thought maybe that he has to go back and get it again. See where we are? We're on Tesvav Amud 15. So we say, and I know that you can translate this the way we did right on the page before, that we said that you can go back and receive the blood a second time. However, but if it would enter your mind that you can't fix it up, so then then what do you mean you can go get it? Would already be possible. This is a raya that it doesn't become possible. In other words, the sacrifice would become possible just because you're getting more blood, but the sacrifice would already be possible because of what you did with it by handing it to the one that's possible and he walked with it. Okay. Gemara says, "Mi savres the koy zor gavoy," that you have a zor that's standing inside in the area where the animal's being sacrificed, and that's how the person got it. 1 second. It says light. That's not how it was. The Kaiser Baroi, that the Zar is standing outside, and the Kayan is handing the blood to the Zar. We're translating that the puzzle is the Zar. Do you think that the Zar is standing close to the Mizbeach and the Kayan hands it to him? And so we say, light, that's not the case. He said the Kaiser Baroi, that the Zar is standing further away. He's taking it away from the Mizbeach. And because he's not getting it close to the mizbeach, then it's not considered a halacha at all. So when would halacha be considered a halacha? Only when you're getting it close to the mizbeach. But if you're getting it further away, then we would say that it's not considered a halacha. You're going in the wrong direction. So maybe now we don't have a proof that original shaila is if you can fix it up or not, because this wasn't even considered a halacha at all.
Same, work by John Point.
Yeah. Itzmar. We didn't say a blemish kain. The note said a blemish kain. It said puzzle. Puzzle could mean anyone that's not eligible. That's the not eligible could mean a non-kain. It could mean a blemish thing. It's one of the possibilities was Itmar. We have a statement that goes like this: Amrul Am Rabbi Yechanan halacha shlei beregel psula. Comes invalid if it's halacha, if it's moving closer to the altar, but it wasn't by foot. Alma. Obviously, if you tell me that it's puzzle, then obviously you can't fix it. So, Isri Rav Nachman le'ula. Rav Nachman asks Ula. Ula said over this halacha. Rav Nachman says, "Nishmach min hakeli al ritzva safek kosher." 1 second. Blood spills onto the floor, and then you take the klisharis, you go down, you scoop the blood back up. It says it's still eligible to pour it on to sprinkle it on the altar. Problem is that when the blood spills, it doesn't spill all in one spot. It spills when it spills, it spreads out. You were telling me that halacha shlei beregel, that moving without the feet, that means like passing it, that was considered moving it. 1 second, when it spills, so it's moving. But once it spilled, it wasn't being done by the kohen. And it moves, even if he picks it up and he moves it again, making it look like you can fix the problem, but it was already possible. The Gemara says, that it did not get closer to the altar when it spilled. It got further away. Oh, it got further away, then that's not considered halacha. The Gemara says, what are you talking about? When something spills, it only spills it in one direction. It doesn't go in all directions. So the Gemara says, "B'makam midra," and it was on a slant. So when it pours, it only spills to one side. Ibayasema, yeah.
So easier to scoop up.
Right. Another pshat we could say is beguma, that it fell into a hole, so it didn't move anywhere. Ibayasema besmicha. It was thick blood, so that it just fell. It was just like a coagulated. Okay, now the Gemara says, I turn the page because it's this is the comment. Do we need the Tana to give me all of these cases? They're talking about if the blood spills on the floor. Why do we have to say in the next chapter we talk about that if the blood spills on the floor directly from the animal's neck? This is a different case, not when it spills from the vessel. And then he picks it up, that's puzzle. Only if it spills, once it was caught into the vessel, then it spills on the floor, and then he can pick it up and it's good. But if it spills directly on the floor, you can't collect it from the floor. So then it's puzzle. Liflik b'dida. Why don't we just talk about this case itself where you accepted it into a keli and then it's spilled on the floor? When do we say that it's kosher when it spills on the floor? That's kashiat l'chutz. That's only if it's spilled in one direction away from the altar. Aval nichnas lifnim, but if it's spilled in the direction closer to the altar, then it would be puzzle, right? Those are good questions that we can ask on Ula. I was quoting Rabbi Yechanan that was saying that it's impossible to rectify something that was moved, even though it wasn't walked. Quoted in the name of Rabbi Yechanan. Yesmar. Another statement. Halacha shlei beregel. Do we consider that Aveda? That's machlekes Reb Shimon and Rabbanan. It's machlekes Reb Shimon and Rabbanan. Why? Because Reb Shimon held that it wasn't necessary, halacha, and therefore it's not considered avodah. But according to the Chachamim, it is considered avodah. Now, Reb Shimon really said this by every halacha. Here we're saying this is halacha shlei b'regel. Halacha Rabasi, if it had to be a big walk, he slaughtered the animal far away from the altar. So Kuli Amalei Pligi de Psula, everyone would agree that it was possible, even Reb Shimon. Ki Pligi Be'alacha Zutarti. The machlekes is if there was only a small walk. What was the machlekes? That you could theoretically sprinkle the blood right where you're standing all the way onto the altar.
So you never, they would never shecht an animal on the.
Only the bird was done on the altar. All the other
Oh,
animals are done on the
they're
floor.
always shech.
Malika.
So why did Yaakov?
Yitzchak. Yeah, that's interesting.
You think that was like the example, even though Hashem said, no, don't do the mouse.
Interesting. I don't know.
Maybe that's, maybe.
People are different.
No, maybe that's it.
Yeah,
No,
Hashem
maybe
said.
Hashem was
You
showing
mentioned it
that
before.
he never really wanted it.
Was take it, not a big deal offering, all these things that need an altar, they could do.
I know it's- I know.
What about
I was
what
gonna
about
say-
what about with Baal? Yes.
What was that?
With
Baal?
Eliyahu
Oh,
Navi.
you know,
Were they shechted on the Mizbeach?
I don't know if it says that. I know they slaughtered it and they were putting it on waiting for the fire to come. I'm not sure.
I think it only worked a few minutes.
What about before, when we didn't have basement, when we had the individual?
Bummer?
Yeah. Would they shechted on the bummer or?
I don't know. I don't know if they were offered on the bum. What do you want to say, Hill?
You mentioned earlier that only some sacrifices have been altered, some of them don't. Like things that were like, it wasn't good offering. There were certain things that need to alter, some didn't. Maybe in this case, since you didn't do a sin or anything, this type of no, didn't happen.
They were saying, Dr. Stein is asking, why Yitzchak was attempted to be slaughtered on the altar when sacrifices are not offered, are not slaughtered on the altar, they're only offered on the altar. It should have been done on the floor. And then afterwards you bring them up to burn.
So maybe that was the proof that Hashem
Shalom.
never really wanted him to
The
slaughter.
Shalom says by people it's different.
No, but specifically by Yitzchak, that really wasn't, Hashem's intent was never to do that.
All right,
It
maybe.
gives him more time. Like Hashem saw that he.
I don't know. Okay.
It's also
So the
like a
Gemara-
one-time thing. It's not like
Right.
as many.
Right.
There was no chatas over there. Oila.
Yeah, but whatever the case is, usually the slaughtering is not done on the altar. Okay, so what was this? This was a statement that they made in the yeshiva that there's a difference on how long the walk was. If it was a big walk or a short walk, if it's a big walk, then Reb Shimon would agree that it's possible. A short walk, then that's where the
What's
machlekes is.
considered a long walk?
Doesn't say exactly.
Is it the same with sleeping during the day?
Certain amount of time. So it says Machal and Marava. They laughed about this in Eretz Yisrael. They made a distinction. Al chatas ha'oif. When it comes to the chatas ha'oif, the psula b'machshava, we know that if there's the wrong thoughts, it would invalidate the sacrifice. The Reb Shimon, according to Reb Shimon, he holds that halacha is not significant, right? It says Heichem mishkachas. How can you have halacha according to Reb Shimon by the chatas? But you don't have halacha. How can you have machshava by the sprinkling? If he thought about it before the blood comes out of it, like klomu, then that's nothing. Because what's he doing? He's moving his hand. That's nothing. He busted nafik. If it's after the blood came out, it's avdalei mitzvasi, then the mitzvah's already done. Doesn't need to actually go to go onto the altar to be to satisfy the obligation. So how is there ever going to be thoughts by this? If it's before the blood comes out, it's nothing. If it's after it comes out, it's already valid. This is my kushya. What's the problem? Dilma mid the parish the matal mizbeach. Maybe in the interim, from after it comes out until it gets to the altar, that's the amount of time over there. It's considered it would invalidate if he has thoughts on it.
Maybe during.
During while it's coming out until it gets to the altar. Okay. The Haboy Mini Rabbi Yirmiyah Reb Zera, because Rabbi Yirmiyah asked Reb Zera the following question. Rabbi Yirmiyah is a student of Reb Zera. He says, let's say sprinkling blood. Before the blood actually reaches the altar, the kohen's hand gets chopped off. So what's going to be the din?
Why would the hand get chopped off?
I don't know. Got hit by a.
Within the time so the second we can make this one, it was a bit corrupt, and somebody didn't like how he was doing it, so he chopped off his hand. And then he catches it. What?
So the blood is on its way to the altar, and meanwhile his hand goes off. Yeah, you have an example.
This laws.
What laws?
Oh, he's still talking about Dakenis Yitzchak.
Okay.
No, we're trying to figure out how his hand got chopped.
Oh.
The shechita knife accidentally fell off and chopped.
Right.
Oh no.
So what's going to be the din? Now the problem is like this: if he already got the blood to the mizbeach, then the service was done by a kohen that's not a balmum. But if he's still in the middle of the service, then he becomes a balmum. Then he has a blemish. Yeah, he has a blemish. Amalei. So Reb Zera says to Reb Yirmiyah, Reb Yirmiyah is known to have questions that are
Very annoying. Yeah, they always have take on.
So this is one of his questions.
Is it a
Reb Zera responds. He says, "Psula, my timer. What's the reason why it's puzzled?" It says, "Well, we would thought that the reason is because it didn't reach the altar yet." He says, "Behiza v'nosan be'inan." That is considered hazah until it goes to the altar. Yeah. Sprinkle and apply. So in other words, it has to be all done by the kohen that's eligible.
Sounds like a sprinkle and apply 3 times a day.
Hold like very, very, very that is fun to do for him.
Can be. Say the guy that came out of the pharmacy shaking.
Because
It said shake well before taking.
If he cut his hand, if he cut not off, just cut a little bit, it would stop him from moving his, to do the rest of the job. Because he moved back.
Is that a move?
If he gets someone in the middle of doing the Vaita, what? And it's like this case.
So it depends. If the Avaida was finished, so
It's in the middle.
then he's in the middle. If it's finished, then the Avaida was done and it's satisfactory. But if he's still in the middle of the Avaida, that's what we're saying over here is that it didn't reach the altar yet.
Fine.
So then it would invalidate it. That's what Reb Zera answered. Now the problem now is that the Amirayim in Eretz Yisrael were laughing about the way that in Bavel they spoke about Reb Shimon's difference between if it was a big walk or a short walk. Now
They were arguing with people
so
Bavel and Eretz Yisrael.
Yeah.
Argument.
yeah, so the question was that how is it possible? The question was, how is it possible to have machshava by chatas ha'oif because automatically, if it left the oif, then it's if it left the oif, then it's already done. And if it was before it left, then it wasn't the avodah yet. So now we're saying that that's not true, because 1 second, why would that be a question? Because the question would be, how is it possible to have machshava? We know that there's a possibility of machshava bechat asayf. We said it's an impossibility. If you say that there's a concept of halacha, so then that's where the machshava would take place. According to this, where there's a small, there's no, not really our issue. It's because it's a small walk. So 1 second, but there is one section over here where the blood doesn't reach the altar yet. Before it reaches the altar, that's still considered part of the service according to Reb Zera. So there is machshava by even by Chat Hasaif. The Gemara says now, Yasser Papa Rav Huna Brid Rav Yeshua Rav, when the Rav Papa and Rav Huna Brid Rav Yeshua came from the yeshiva, Amri Hainu Chucha, says that what they were laughing about in Eretz Yisrael, about the short walk, that Reb Shimon would say that it's not considered anything. The Halacha Rabasi, where he has to take a big walk. The difference between the short walk and the big walk, lei pligi. That's not really that's not really the machlek. Halacha Rabasi lei pligi. By the big walk, that's not where the machlekes is. But ki pligi by Halacha Rabasi lei pligi. Maybe you have to read it like that. But ki pligi by Halacha Rabasi pligi.
Yeah, you read it right. Disagree only if they're the moon.
They only disagree about the long walk. And we said it before that that by a big walk they don't disagree. They only disagree about the short walk.
Oh, so now it explains why Rav Shimon is different, because Rav Shimon says, yeah, it's a long walk, we all agree, but Rav Shimon says, but you happen to be right by the altar where it's a short walk, you don't need the halach.
Right.
That's why he
Right.
doesn't count.
So by the big walk, they argue. By the short walk, it's late pligi. So what would be late pligi?
No, they don't argue. They all agree by a long walk that if they use a machshava that it invalidates it. Their own.
No. So now the Gemara is switching.
So halacha is a bona fide. Halacha is a bona fide avodah during which intent can invalidate the sacrifice, according to all the rabbis. So all the rabbis agree that halacha can invalidate it. It's just Rav Shimon says
Right.
that if it's a short walk, it doesn't invalidate because short walk there's no real halacha.
So you don't need a walk.
No. Rav Shimon holds, what we're saying now is Rav Shimon holds that even by the long walk, he says that it's nothing because you could have done it next to the altar. It wasn't necessary to do it there.
Right. Oh, I'm sorry.
So the Gemara now says, Ella, rather we have to explain the machlekes b'heilacha. B'heilacha zutarti, if it's a short walk, kuli amali pligi d'lei pasel. Everyone would agree that it's not pasel, because there is no real necessary halacha. Ki pligi, where is the machlekes b'heilacha rabasi when it's a big walk? According to the Chachamim, well, they have to get it from the where it's slaughtered to the altar. And according to Reb Shimon, it says that's not necessary because he didn't have to do it over there. Now the
But
Gemara
what would Rav
says,
Shimon hold b'di'evet if he did do it over there? Then how would Rav Shimon?
Even nevertheless, it's not considered a Aveda.
It's still
Yeah. That resolves the problem of the question that we had, and everything gets answered according to that. Because we don't have any issue here, because until the blood reaches the altar, that in that interim, that's the time when the animal could be, when the thoughts would make it possible. Elicha Yizar, let's say a non-Kayan walked it up to the altar. Bechsiri Kayan. The Kayan takes it back and does it again. Bechazar ve'elicha, and he walks it again. Pligi ba b'nei Reb Chia v'Reb Yanai. Reb Chia's sons and Reb Yanai argue about this. Chad Amar kasher. One of them says that it's kasher because it was done correctly. Chad Amar pasal. One says that it's pasal. Mar Savar, the one that says that it's kasher, holds efshel l'sukuni, that you could fix it. But Mar Savar, the other Amar, holds efshel l'sukuni, you can't fix it. Okay.
Do they not know who says who?
I'm sorry?
Do they not know who says who?
No, they don't know. Elicha Kayan, let's say a Kayan walks it to the altar, and then he takes it back, and then a Zar walks it. So now, Amar Rav Simya Barashi L'Divrei HaMachshir, according to the one that said before that it was kosher when the Zar walked it up and you could redo it, so then over here it's going to be pasul. Why? Because the second one that's redoing it, he's trying to correct something. If you say that redoing it is actually acceptable, so who did it last? Was the Zar. So now it would become pasul. Well, Divrei HaPaisel, the one that says that you can never redo anything, so then it would be machshir. Then he would say that it's kosher, because what was the first halacha was done by the kohen. It was the second halacha that wasn't done correctly. So Rava Amar, Rava says, Afal Divrei HaPaisel, even according to one that said before that it was possible, because you cannot redo it. If the Zar brought it, the kohen can't redo it. Over here, Divrei HaPaisel, over here would be pasul as well, even though the kohen brought it. My timer, because Sarich Le'em Tuyeh, you have to bring it to the altar. It has to reach the altar. Because I guess the point of the halacha is to get it close to the altar. Because it was distant from the altar, and anything that's getting it close is considered the halacha. It was being done by someone that's pasul. Amalei Rav Yirmiyah Rav Ashi. Rav Yirmiyah says to Rav Ashi, Hachi Amar Rav Yirmiyah Midifti. This is what Rav Yirmiyah Midifti says. Hatzarach Lam Tuyeh. This svara that you have to get it close to the altar, and therefore would become invalid if it was done the second time by a zar. That's actually machlekes Rabbi Elazar Rabbanan. That's actually a different machlekes. The Tanan is taught in a Mishnah that there's 4 things that invalidate the sacrifice: shchita, kabbalah, halacha, and zrika. The slaughtering, the receiving, the walking it, and the sprinkling. Rabbi Elazar says, mahalach makim shetzarach lalach. If you go somewhere where you need to walk, so then machshava peiselas, then that's considered invalid. Makom shein tzarich lalach, but if it's somewhere you don't need to walk, ein machshav b'selis, and it doesn't become invalid. Amar Rava, and Rava says, Akal Maidim, everyone agrees, whether it's Rebbe Lezer the Cham, Kibla b'chutz b'chnis b'fnim. If you receive the blood b'chutz over here, it doesn't mean outside, it means distant from the altar, and you brought it close, so it's zeu hilach shetzarich lalach, that would be a necessary walking. Kibla b'fnim eitzil l'chutz, but if you brought it, if it started, the blood was received close to the altar, and then you bring it away from the altar. This is a walking which was not necessary. So where would the machlekes be? When first you bring the blood close, and then you bring it out. Mar Savar, the Chachamim hold that it's still, you still have to bring it close again because it moved away. Mar Savar, Rabbi Elazar holds that it's not considered necessary because it was already close before. So this, when the Kayan brings it and then a Zar brings it close, that would actually be a machlekes Rebbe Elazar and the Chachamim. So when Rava said that it would be pasul, that would only fit with the Chachamim, but according to Rebbe Eliezer, that wouldn't be considered anything. Eisvei Abaya. Abaya has a question on what they just quoted. Rabbi Eliezer Eimer, a Mahalach. B'makom shetzarach lahalech, machshava peiseles. If you go somewhere where it's necessary to walk, then the thoughts during that walk is invalidates. Ketzad, what would the case be? Kivla b'chutz v'chnisa lifnim. Receive the blood distant from the altar, and you bring it close to the altar. Zehu hilach shetzarach lahalech. Kivla v'fnim v'yitzil l'chutz. But if you receive the blood close and then you bring it away from the altar, zehu hilach shein tzarach lahalech. This is a walk that's not necessary, and so therefore that walk, thoughts during that walk would be nothing. Hachaz v'chnisa. But if you then bring it close afterwards, that would be a necessary walk. It's only walking away that's not necessary. Now we're seeing that even according to Rebbe Eliezer, the bringing it close would invalidate. And you were telling me before that according to Rebbe Eliezer, it wouldn't be invalid. Amalei itanya tanya. If there's a brisa that actually says this, then you're right.
Yeah.
And therefore, there would be no machlekes between Rebbe Eliezer and Chacham according to everyone, if bringing the blood closer would actually invalidate, if thoughts during bringing the blood closer would actually invalidate. Okay, so what happens over here? Okay, Hadron Lachkal Zavachim. Let's complete the first paragraph. Let's leave it there.
Only 6 pages.
Oh no.
What?